a distance, it appeared as though the girlfriend's days consisted of bopping around Beverly Hills shops, driving flashy cars, and toting designer handbags. Participate in the cocaine vendors, the side boyfriends, or all their harebrained money-making schemes that were all in direct violation of house rules. I rarely left the mansion, so making it home in time for curfew was never an issue either. Needless to say, my goody two-shoes reputation wasn't the most welcome among this group of girls, and clear plastic platform heels, and appeared to have brought her pimp with her. For a moment, I remember wondering if she was actually a female impersonator. There weren't too many women like her running around Portland at the time, and I was so distracted by her appearance that, for the life of me, I can't recall a single thing she said. The other girl was pretty, but not too remarkable, and I guess about 10 years older than me. I came to try out because I've always wanted to be a playmate, she gushed. The man with the clipboard smiled and nodded, pretending not to have heard this response more than 20,000 times already. And me and my best friend have a bet on who would become one first. I want to be Miss April. Then it was my turn. I've always dreamed of moving to Los Angeles and becoming an actress, I explained, the other two candidates glaring at me. I had the most minor surgery before, but I was young, fearless, and determined to look my best. After all, you only live once, right? During my consultation, that I actually thought I would be up on my feet that same day. Foolishly, I planned on keeping the entire ordeal a secret from my parents. I wasn't in the habit of discussing my private anatomy with my mom and dad, and since I'd been stuffing my bras religiously, threats from Portland State didn't apply towards my program at Loyola Marymount. In order to graduate on time, I'd have to load up on credits, which included long theater hours that would require working backstage on different productions during the evenings when I typically waitressed. I knew that with a packed school schedule and a full-time job, I wouldn't have any time to study. And if I couldn't study, I wouldn't be able to meet the minimum grade requirements of my scholarships. So after a year at LMU, I decided to take a break from school to focus on pursuing my career. I would never be as young or as eager as I was in that moment, and I figured that I might as well take the plunge. School would always be there, as someone accustomed to these types of events. Working together, I knew that Kira had seen her fair share of Playboy parties. And inside the 70s themed game house before making our way into the main event. Gorgeous, colorful fabrics didn't make a habit of reading Shakespeare, and in some cases, quite possibly had never even heard of the play the party was named for. Everything looked so sensuous and inviting. It wasn't until we were tucked away in a corner of the tent that I finally spotted our infamous host, looking quite gloomy. A year after my first Playboy hopefuls, unable to land one of those 12 coveted spots, modeled for less prestigious minor pictorials in Playboy, or for pictorials on Playboy no longer needed to pay. As for Hef, he would tuck away in the corner of the pool and play back. I could never understand their lack of enthusiasm. They seemed to have it all. Initially, I assumed they were spoiled, jaded, and that all of their encouragement was just for show. As I come to learn, he told me that when she went on Howard Stern after scoring her centerfold, and cheerfully denied that any of the girls slept with Hef with a dismissive laugh, she was promptly kicked out of the marriage to go back to Oregon. Not only did I not want to burden my parents, I also knew that leaving now would set back any progress I had made in becoming an actress. The desire to perform was what drove me to Los Angeles, and the thought of returning home miserable in pink candy-striped satin sheets and piled high with Playboy branded clothing, free gifts from them used to treat the mansion as a drive-thru back in the 70s. He would call the butler's pantry ahead of time, order a meal, and look pretty appealing. Around that time, a few of the girls had suggested that I come out with them for one of the bi-weekly club nights. One of the girlfriends, Kimberly, had recently been kicked out, which meant there was an open spot Hef was ready to fill. Talk to Hef, Vicky encouraged after I confided in her about my housing problems. Never did it occur to me to simply approach him myself. It also never occurred to me that the then 7 girlfriends only wanted me around because my ordinary appearance was non-threatening. They wanted to make sure whoever filled the empty space wasn't competition. On Sunday, I worked, and worse yet, they encouraged his awkward dancing about. Back then, he seemed like such a meaning to. Like the porn itself, it was all just for show. There was loud music blaring, but if you got close enough to any of the girls, you could hear them gossiping with one another or making fun of what was going on in front of them. Very nonchalant about their initiation. Before the sun even rose the following morning, these hustlers were already calculating just how many pennies they could squeeze out of the arrangement. Next, we had the runners. While the hustlers were scheming, the runners were fleeing. Like a hit and run, these girls would bolt from the scene, never to be heard from again. All I had said was that I was moving in, nothing about being intimate with anyone. I guess not everyone was as naive as I had been. Seeing the angry look that appeared on my face, he quickly switched gears. So, he said, his voice much friendlier, can you get me on the list for the parties? This guy. While evenings at the mansion were pretty regimented, during the day we were virtually free to do as we pleased. Pep was usually awake by 10 a.m. for breakfast, then meandered down the hall to his office wing where he would work on the magazine, various book projects, and other good. No, you don't, I said. You look fine. Thanks, she replied through a toothy grin. As I knelt down to pet one of her 3 dogs, she picked up the phone next to her bed, pressed 0 for the butler's pantry, and ordered a piece of chocolate cake and a glass of chocolate milk for breakfast. The necklace had nothing to do with its value, however. Sure, I coveted one, but my worries stemmed from what it symbolized. Pep's words echoed in my mind. You can stay for a while and we'll see how it works out. Maybe I wasn't making the cut. That had to be why he hadn't graced me with a necklace yet. In the few weeks I had been there, he had presented one to Charis Boyle, an upcoming centerfold, whom he had met after me. Somehow I had been skipped over. Oh, he hasn't? Lisa asked for Baywatch Hawaii. He kept a much closer eye on any acting work the girlfriends tried to pursue. I secretly hoped to land a role big enough that it would allow me to leave the mansion after a few months, but those kinds of dream jobs were few and far between. Eventually, I would receive offers for smaller parts in music videos and low-budget films, but the hours often went past our curfew and the jobs rarely paid much, so they hardly seemed worth it. If anything, they would only land me in hot water with my boyfriend who, as the weeks passed into months, appeared more and more controlling. It seemed my acting dreams were stalling for the time being. I felt caught between a rock and a hard place. I thought having a rent-free roof over my head would make chasing my dreams so much. A trip to New York City for his Comedy Central's Friars Club roast. I'd never been to New York before. I'd actually never new playmate up to the bedroom to pay their dues. In those first few years, I would say the majority of the playmates eventually selected had found their way into Pep's bedroom. I guess Vicky figured that if she had to sleep with Pep, they all should have to sleep with him. I was too naive to realize it at the time, but Pep was the catalyst for all the drama I was to experience at the mansion. He recognized that some of the girls were warming up to me and began to use my perfect attendance as one of his many tools to manipulate and control his wild path. Pitting the girlfriends against one another created an aggressively pretty deteriorated, so like him, I acted as if I did not hear their harsh remarks. My silence only further incited them and their attacks became more vicious. Once I started acquiring a decent wardrobe, my clothing began mysteriously disappearing. When I would send things downstairs to be as exclusive as it might sound, as many of the girlfriends brought their female friends who joined us for our entrance. Everyone was dressed in something skin-tight, a spandex-clad race car driver, a spandex-clad taxi driver. It was a far cry from what I pictured life here would be like when I first laid eyes on the gorgeous Bentley twins a year and a half earlier at the locked up in the Beast's castle. I developed my own brand of Stockholm Syndrome, identified with my captor. I felt like there was no one I could turn to besides Hep. I thought I could trust him. Somehow Hep became the good guy in my eyes. Slowly, I started to isolate myself from the other girls for good $100 to spend on gifts for each girl living at the mansion at that time, and belonged in the scrapyard, not in the driveway of the Playboy Mansion. Happily and gratefully, I accepted, even though the car was way too big and gaudy for my taste. After all, beggars can't be choosers. Little did I know that accepting the new ride would cause the other girls to hate me even more, if that was possible. Not only was the Escalade more expensive than anything the other girls drove plastic surgery while living in the mansion, because it was clear so many of us did. The answer is both simple and complex. No, we were not obligated to have plastic surgery while living there. However, the mansion was a virtual breeding ground for superficial insecurities. And most girls care, right? She finally snapped. When I arrived at the Jose Iber salon, it was like arriving in a whole new world. The staff